pick and prevail in your fantasy football league with the help of our starting lineup. At host to quarterback the show, we have Nick Giacobbe. Up next, a dual threat in Dynasty and Daily Fantasy, we have Cody Repass. And finally, working the waiver wire, we have Nick Cap. These are your playmakers that will provide you with sleepers, breakouts, and busts to help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome, everybody, to episode 15 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks, in the hopes that we help you prevail throughout the 2021 fantasy football season. I am your host, Nick Giacobbe, and with me is Nick Capsalis. Nick, Week 6, we're recording on Sunday night. Not after all the games. We still have the Seahawks versus the Steelers, but we're recording after most of the games. So, how did your Week 6 go so far?
I think I got two games where I'm locked in for a win, and then my other four are all up in the air, but I'm feeling pretty confident about most of them. So I'm not too concerned, and it's a good day when the Jets they don't lose, but they still go up in the division. We're not last place in the division now. It's been a beautiful week so far.
You'll enjoy that for like 1 or 2 more weeks, and then back to reality. I have to watch my Seahawks play in about 15, 20 minutes. We did want to finish this recording before the game, but the Cowboys decided to take things into overtime. So I get to watch Geno Smith play in 20 minutes. That's just wonderful. I have one win that's probably in the bag. I just saw Jonathan Taylor rack up 40 points last week or almost. So I never want to say something's in the bag, but one is probably pretty well handled. My dynasty team did pretty well, but they could still lose. So I don't want to say that I've won yet. I have 2 other games up in the air, but I think I'm in a pretty good place with them. And I have one game that's just, it didn't work out. So I could go 3-1, I could go 0-4, but hopefully it's the former for that one. And hopefully all of you guys won your matchups this week. I'm hopefully be able to help you out with your start sits and everything else. And we're going to try to help you again today. We have some injury news, waiver wire, and other stuff that we need to talk about. But before we do that, if this is your first time listening, thank you so much. Hopefully it's not the last time. We do the show on Tuesdays, Fridays, and Sundays. The Sunday show is live. For the Tuesday and Friday shows, you can find the audio versions on Stitcher, Google Podcasts, iTunes/Apple, basically anywhere where you could find your audio podcast. If you're on Apple, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. We also do the show on YouTube if you want both the video and audio content on our YouTube channel at PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. For the live show on Sunday, it's 11 a.m. Eastern Time on our Twitter, our Facebook, and our YouTube page. We answer your questions throughout the entire show. We talk about some injury news. We do start, sit, anything to help you guys right before kickoff. So please join those every single Sunday. If you do want to support us on social media and to watch the show, and please do, follow us on Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram at PrimeTimeFFPod. Facebook is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, and YouTube is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Alrighty, Nick, first off, we're going to do an injury update on all the players that were injured in Week 6. First off, we have Antonio Gibson. He left the game twice. First was with a shin injury. Second was with the calf injury. I believe the calf injury is the one he's been dealing with. I think he scored less than 5 fantasy points, or maybe it was 6. Not a great game for Gibson. We don't have any update at the moment. No MRIs, nothing like that. I just think it's general soreness, and he just couldn't get through the game. But Nick, if you are a Antonio Gibson owner, how worried are you at the moment about these nagging injuries?
I mean, you never want to see multiple injuries to the same part of your body. That's never a good sign for most of these running backs. He only got 10 carries in the game. He got 2 receptions and a fumble. So his production clearly was not there, and he did not have a good week. I'm a little concerned. J.D. McKissic had a little bit more of a boom week. And we know Ron Rivera actually really likes McKissic. So if these injuries keep racking up, he's going to feel comfortable sitting him to let J.D. McKissic rock. So we'll see how it goes. But I'm definitely concerned if I'm a Gibson owner.
Yeah, and they're not on bye until Week 9. His next 2 games are the Packers, who don't have a good defense, and then they have the Broncos, who we thought would have a good defense, but the Raiders just hung up like close to 40 on them. So those could be favorable matchups for Gibson. If you're a Gibson owner, are you considering benching him? I know it's an early question. This is something we'll talk about more on Friday, but is that something in your mind that maybe you're thinking about maybe for a different running back or McKissic?
I mean, it's going to be tough. I mean, knowing that Green Bay matchup's ahead and just seeing what the kid Herbert from Chicago did to them, I mean, it's going to be tough to bench him if he's out there. But I think if you have two good pivots, I might look to do it, especially if you got the wide receiver depth to play at a flex position. I think I would because McKissick had 10 receptions or 10 targets this game. So, I mean, they feel more than comfortable letting him sit a couple snaps, letting him rest. So, and Ron Rivera likes it, so likes McKissick. So I could see sitting him if you have the safer options.
Yeah, we'll see what happens. We'll give you an update closer to Friday's show, or on Friday's show, I should say. We'll have an update at least if he's practicing and the severity of the injury. But it's tough when you have nagging injuries like this. But if he's starting for the football team, he's probably going to be starting in your lineup. T.Y. Hilton returned today, and he had 80 yards, I think 4 receptions, and then he got injured, I believe, early in the second half. It was a quad injury. He left the game. The injury that he was on the IR for was neck surgery, I believe. So there's a new injury for T.Y. Hilton. A lot of quad injuries in the last week and a half. T.Y.'s not on a lot of fantasy rosters, so I'm not sure how much this would affect your fantasy team. He could have had a more productive game. It could have been a waiver wire target, but I think he's still riding. I think he still has to sit on the waivers at the moment.
Yeah, I'm with you. I've said before, T.Y. Hilton has a Hall of Fame career against the Texans, and that's about it. He was great at the start of his career.
He had 4 receptions for 80 yards. He was having a good game.
Exactly, and he played the Texans. He has a Hall of Fame career against the Texans. That's what he's been later in his career too. He should have. I'm not gonna lie. He should have hopped on the chance to go to Baltimore when he did during free agency. That receiving core is pretty crowded as well. The running backs are crowded as well. And there's too many boom options. I think they like Doyle, they like Mo Alley Cox, they like Campbell, they like Pittman, they like Tyler, they like Hines, they like Mack. There's too many options there. There's too many mouths to feed, and he's the veteran odd man out. I would take the opportunity to leave if I were him. And the injuries are just going to keep racking up, so I can't trust rostering him.
Pittman and Taylor may be the only playable Colts at the moment, but Carson Wentz is a flyer. I don't know. He might be possible too.
Yeah.
Kadarius Toney left the game very early in the Giants game with an ankle injury. 3 for 33 in the short time he played. I don't think he got through the first quarter, but he did look pretty good against the Rams. So he wasn't carried out, wasn't carted out, nothing serious. Could miss a game next week. We don't know. Again, we're recording on Sunday night. There might be more information coming out on Monday. But the Giants' Week 7 opponent is the Panthers, who don't have a great secondary. The Vikings, Adam Thielen just had like 100 yards against them, and Jefferson had like 75. So he would be a play next week as long as he's healthy. But again, that's something that we'll have to update you on later on in the week. I'm going to leave this Michael Thomas one for the last. So we're going to start off with Kareem Hunt. I saw him helped off the field, but you said he was carted off.
Yeah, so he was walked off the field, and then when he got to the sideline, they put him on the cart and they took him.
Okay, so Kevin Stefanski confirmed it is a calf injury. It's not Achilles. Left the game at the beginning of the fourth quarter, and he is getting an MRI tomorrow, but definitely didn't look good. I think the best case scenario is almost like Saquon's injury last week, where he's out a week or two. That's just a projection. They are playing Thursday Night Football, so if you're a Kareem Hunt owner, I would bet the house that he's not playing Thursday Night Football. Nick Chubb's also a little bit banged up. I know Stefanski said he had a chance to play, so we don't know. I mean, we don't know what running back's going to be starting for Cleveland on Thursday, but if I had to bet money on it, it's not going to be Kareem Hunt. He won't be starting, and he won't be playing. I would say he's out at least a week, and hopeful that it's nothing more serious than like a strain or a sprain or something like that. So, Nick, what's the results to you or the ramifications of Kareem Hunt possibly being out a week, 2 weeks, or even longer?
I'm pissed as someone that owned Chubb and Hunt and traded Nick Chubb away this past week, relying on Kareem Hunt, thinking he'd be a comfortable running back too, and goes down with what looked like a brutal injury. I said on the live show that there's this kid Felton that they really like. They did not use him as much today as I thought they would, but because Kareem Hunt did see a large workload, but they also went down early and were playing from behind, throwing the ball a lot more than they typically would, and with Chubb not in there, it made sense that was the game script that they had to go with. So that kid Felton, definitely take a look at him. We'll talk about him a little bit more in the waiver wire section, but I think it's going to be his backfield. And with Chubb on this short week, I imagine both of them are not going to be able to play unless they really force Chubb to get in this game because they don't have Hunt.
Baker Mayfield's also hurt. It's his shoulder that's been, was it dislocated? It's the left shoulder. It's not his throwing shoulder, but he's had this injury for a couple of weeks now. He was tackled or he was tripped over by J.J. Watt and just kind of landed on it awkwardly. He's going to get an MRI tomorrow. The arm was in a sling after the game, but Baker did say to the media, quote unquote, that he thinks he'll be able to play through the shoulder injury. He said it dislocated again, I guess, during the game. The left arm is in a sling, and he quote unquote said it feels like shit. So I got to tell you, I know you're not a Baker guy. I know a lot of people aren't Baker guys, but that man's tough. He's tough for playing through this type of injury. It's clearly something that can get dislocated and popped back in throughout the season. He's still playing with it, and that's tough. He's taking hits. He's not avoiding hits. He's not scared to throw the ball. He's taking hits, and that's just how he is. From a fantasy perspective, Odell Beckham had a pretty solid game. I think he had 12 fantasy points, but he had like 5 receptions on, I think it was 7 targets for like close to 80 yards. That's progress, people. He had that type of stat line his first game, then 2 kind of duds. But in those 2 duds, he was still getting targets. Baker just wasn't hitting him. But this is the best that OBJ's probably looked. So OBJ, the wide receiver position is just so deep that if you have the receiver depth, you don't play OBJ. If you don't, he's still playable. As long as Baker's throwing him the ball, he's still playable. He's still OBJ, and he looked good today. I know he got a little dinged up at 1.2, but he looked fine after that. So how do you think Baker's injury could affect this team? He's going to play, it seems like. So let's assume that he's going to play. How could that injury affect this Cleveland team?
I mean, Odell still saw his production. It's his non-throwing arm, so it's not like it's going to have much impact at all on his performance on the field. Definitely minor. It's a nagging injury, and it is what it is. But, I mean, it's not like it's going to affect his ability to throw the ball 30 yards, 40 yards, 50 yards, 60 yards downfield. So I'm not concerned with that. My concern is Baker Mayfield as a player, and I don't think he's that good. I don't think he's a franchise quarterback. Plain and simply put, I think there's better options at the quarterback position for Odell Beckham, for Jarvis Landry. I think both of those guys. I think, and I told Nick this before the show. If Baker did not go down with that injury today, I would have sounded off on him because Odell suffered another injury, and it came because of how poorly this man can place the ball and put his receivers in danger. It's not the first time Odell suffered an injury at the hands of Baker's inaccuracy and leading wide receivers into safeties and into linebackers on short routes. And it genuinely pisses me off as a football fan, like watching a guy with so much talent get injured repeatedly because his quarterback does not know, like, do not throw the ball when there's a middle linebacker running full speed at your wide receiver running a slant route, or aim it low so he could catch it and hit the ground. That's not Baker Mayfield. He puts his players in risk, in danger, and I'm not happy with him as a player, but I don't think it has much more effect because it's not affecting his throwing arm or his mobility. So all the players should still see the same production as long as Baker is still at a quarterback.
The Browns have a Week 13 bye. Maybe they could trade a draft pick with one of these other teams to switch the bye off or something because they still they could desperately use the bye. The Thursday night game is going to be hurtful this week against the Broncos. However, it doesn't mean they're going to get 10 days of rest after that. So if they can get out of that game without any serious injuries, they'll at least have 10 days to get some of these guys healthy. Last bit of news, Michael Thomas is eligible to come off the PUP list, anticipated to return next week, Monday night against the Fantasy Carnival in Seattle. Nick, are you playing Michael Thomas if he is activated off of the PUP?
Absolutely. Such a favorable matchup. Jameis Winston's going to do Jameis Winston things 50% of the time. 30% of the time, he looks like a Hall of Fame quarterback. The other 70%, he needs eye surgery. So we'll see where he's at. But in that favorable matchup, Michael Thomas is going to feast, even though it's his first game back. The guy was the number 1 receiver in fantasy just 2 years ago. If you have him rostered, feel confident playing him. The next best wide receiver on the team was Callaway, who had his best game only because he caught a Hail Mary ball last week, and they were on bye this week. So I think that they work a way to find Michael Thomas in this offense. It was great, honestly, perfect timing for the injury. Come off the pup at the time where you're off your bye week. Like, you have 2 weeks now to prepare your offense to fit in your superstar wide receiver. I love the situation. It couldn't be any better. And what a favorable matchup to go up against. Michael Thomas should be bound for a massive week.
You couldn't have asked for a better matchup, like you said. The Seahawks defense is arguably probably the worst in the league when it comes to both passing, receiving. So if you need a Monday night miracle next week, if you have Kamara, Kamara for sure is going to have a monster game.
Mm-hmm.
If you have Michael Thomas, you're probably going to get you at least 10 points in his first week back. Probably could be more. And if you have Jameis Winston, there's a chance too. We'll talk about him a little bit later on. All right, that is the injury news of the week. We're going to now do a weekly wrap of the studs and duds from week 6. So we're going to start things off with the quarterbacks. Quarterback 1 on the week, Kirk Cousins, 28 points. Quarterback 3, Matthew Stafford with 25 points. Quarterback 7, Joe Burrow, 22 points. Nick, who is your biggest quarterback stud of the week, whether it's these 3 guys or anybody else?
I'm going to talk about someone that you didn't talk about. It's the QB2 on the week. He's my number 1 on the year. It's Kyler Murray. Kyler Murray, he only had 6 rushing yards in the game and finished as the quarterback 2, which just tells me that he's become a much better pocket passer from year 1 to 2 to 3. He's taken such a tremendous step up as a pocket passer, and it's extremely tough for a guy that's, what is he, 5'10", 5'11"? Like, he's shorter than his entire O-line and defensive line, can't see over them, and he's finding ways to work every receiver into this team. It's phenomenal. When Zach Ertz is there, the production's even going to go even further up. And this wasn't a team that he was going to be able to run against with Jadeveon Clowney and Myles Garrett coming off the edge. So Kyler Murray, massive up in my book for being able to put up this type of fantasy performance without being able to use his legs in this game.
I want to note that Dak Prescott was actually the quarterback 2. I'm looking it up now. We didn't have that in our show notes because the game just ended, jumped in. So Kyler goes to 3, Stafford to 4, and Burrow to 5. Stafford, we expected this, I think, coming to the Rams. So I'm going to talk about Joe Burrow. I think he's posted a couple really good stat lines this season. He's doing this against basically every team. He did it against the Packers. He did it against the Steelers. The Lions are pitiful. We said it was a great matchup. I said he was a lock last week. I said the player Bengals. Not every Bengal had a great week, but Joe Burrow is one of them. I had him in my dynasty league. I think he scored 33 fantasy points before they pulled him at the start of the fourth quarter. Smartly pulled him. No reason to keep him in the game at that point. He looks locked and loaded. They're facing the Ravens next week, the biggest game for the Bengals this season. Win or lose, though, they've looked like a good football team. They should have beat the Packers last week. They've beaten the Steelers, who are a good football team. The Bears is that one weird game, and you know what? Good teams have weird games. The Packers got slapped around by the Saints. The Seahawks have gotten slapped around before. I've been a Seahawks fan for 10 years, and I've seen them lose games they should not lose. So It happens, and the Bengals are not an elite team yet, but the Bengals are a competitive team, so it'll be a competitive one next week against Baltimore. The only 2 duds I really have on the week are Lamar Jackson, quarterback 18 with 11.78 points, and Justin Herbert, quarterback 19 with 11 points. Lamar's a weird one. Like, they blew out the Chargers. I know Latavius Murray had a touchdown. I know Devontae Freeman had a touchdown.
So did Bell.
And so did Bell. That's why, those are 12 points off the board right there. That's probably why. But still, like, Lamar looked good. I'm not worried about him going forward. He didn't play bad. Just the game script. Didn't really need to throw a lot. Didn't throw in the end zone. I'm not worried about it. If you have him, that just sucks. It's just something that sucks for this week. But game script wise, he didn't need to do much. He didn't need to do more. So I'm not really worried about Lamar Jackson. Nick, do you want to talk about Herbert, or is there any other dud that you would like to talk about?
No, yeah, I'm going to go with Herbert. I like everything you said about Lamar. I completely agree. And I kind of got the same analysis on Herbert. It was a tough game. Mike Williams a little dinged up there. Keenan Allen didn't get as much separation as he typically does. Jared Cook had the one touchdown early on, or right before the second half. Eckler struggled to get going. The whole offense really struggled. And Staley's play calling is much of an analytical game where, it's 4th and 5. It's the odds say go for it. That's what he's going to do. So he's going to be the guy that's going to go for it and put you in a position to win. And just as much, he's going to put you in a position to lose, which leads to better game scripts. But the whole team struggled to get going. They're going into the bye. I'm not worried. Once they come off the bye, they're going to be fresh. They're going to have a nice – I don't know who they'll play off the bye, but I'm not too concerned about Herbert. I think it's just a one-off, and I wouldn't really stress it if you're a Herbert owner.
The Chargers play the Patriots off the bye. So they have a week to figure things out.
Yeah.
Alrighty, on to the wide receivers. Wide receiver 1 jumped right up at the end of that Cowboys game and probably won some fantasy matchups. CeeDee Lamb, 36 fantasy points. Wide receiver 2, Cooper Kupp back in the top 3 with 34. Adam Thielen with 29. Jalen Waddle with 29. Antonio Brown with 24. Who would you like to talk about, Nick? Who is your biggest wide receiver stud of the week?
I'm gonna talk. We talked about Antonio Brown actually on the live show, so you can go check that out if you want to go listen to our take on AB. So I'm gonna pass on him for this time. I'm gonna talk CD Lamb, and as a result, more so on Amari Cooper. CD Lamb has really taken over as the wide receiver one on this team. It's clear cut. Week one, Cooper led the team. It was such a gap, and ever since Gallup's injury, Lamb has stepped up and really been the wide receiver one on this team. It's a top 5 offense in football, no questions asked. The Cowboys look like a Super Bowl contender. Lamb's phenomenal. He's a great player. He's the sophomore breakout that everybody was looking for. I think we'll find out more for Friday's show about Claypool's performance. I think those are your two guys that are going to be the sophomore flyers, as well as Debo, but he's on the bye, so we won't talk about him. But Lamb has been phenomenal, nothing short of it. Where you drafted him, you got to be stoked. He had one bad game with a 3.3, and like every other game has been practically flawless from where his draft pick was.
All right. I mean, I'm just going to run through the others. Cooper Kupp, incredible. Just an incredible season. I think he had 11 receptions for like 140 yards and a touchdown. Just something
Crazy.
Incredible. Like I thought after last week they would spread the ball around a bit with Robert Woods breaking out, but nope. Like Stafford's found his target. If you have Cooper Kupp in Dynasty, you're set for the next like 5 years, and you got major value off of that one. If you got Cooper Kupp this year in like rounds 5 or 6, again, just major value. Jalen Waddle, another one. Like that's Tua's favorite target. It's there. He's going to get targets every week, and Waddle's a guy that now I think you have to play him every week, unless he's facing like Ramsey. Like you play that guy every week because he's going to get his targets. I want to talk about Adam Thielen. You were very high on DJ Moore, Nick. DJ Moore only scored 10 points.
Hold on, let me just quickly clarify. I was high on Thielen as well. I just wasn't as high as Justin Jefferson.
No, you said DJ Moore's outscoring both of them.
I did say DJ Moore will outscore both of them.
DJ Moore was ranked 3. He scored 10 points. Jefferson scored 14, 16. Thielen had 29. And Thielen had like a touchdown and like I think 8 targets and like 100.
Thielen played well. I'll give you that.
I mean, Thielen's had a couple of rough weeks, but like that dude's just not going anywhere. Neither is Jefferson. They're just guys you play every single week. No reason to worry about them. I know it's a run-first team, but Kirk can throw the ball. Kirk's a stat sheet stuffer. Kirk is a great fantasy quarterback because he stuffs the stat sheet. He can lose the game by 14 points, but Kirk Cousins could have 29 fantasy points. And you know what? In fantasy, that's all that matters. That's all you need in fantasy is a stat sheet stuffer, and that's what Kirk Cousins is. So he's a viable backup and a situational quarterback. And the duds of the week, T. Higgins, 7.4. Weird game for the Bengals. Like, I don't think did Chase have 11, 12? Boyd had an awful game, but the Bengals, great win for the Bengals. They smoked the Lions. So just a weird game for the receivers. Higgins 7.4, Mike Evans 4.7, and Mike Williams 4.7. Nick, which one would you like to talk about? Any of these 3 or anybody else?
Let's talk a little Mike Evans. Mike Evans, it's been a tough season. You know, with Antonio Brown being there, I think he's the number 1 locked-in wide receiver for the team. Antonio Brown is still a dominant wide receiver in this league that is creating separation on whoever you put him up against. He was the only guy out of the 3 that saw true production against Jalen Ramsey, and not a lot of receivers are still able to do that. Antonio Brown he hasn't lost a step. He's not the same player, but he's phenomenal. He really is a great player, and it's coming to the detriment of Godwin and Mike Evans, and more so Evans, because Evans isn't seeing that end zone work. And once Gronk comes back, I don't know how you can.
Evans is very, very boomer bust, and it's why I avoided him, because I had him last year, and the weeks that he goes off, he has 200 yards and 2 touchdowns. The weeks that he doesn't, he has this, and I want a consistency with my wide receivers. And here's the thing about AB. I don't think people are talking about him enough. I think if you took away his name and you put his stats, you just took away who he is, you showed film of this guy and these stats, and you compared him to most receivers in the league, I think people are calling him a top 10 wide receiver in the league. He's playing like one. Yep. I got to pull up his stats right now just to clarify exactly what we're talking about right now, because I just don't think he's getting enough credit at the moment.
Just real quick, while you pull up the stats, before this week, there was a blind stat sheet of the total receiving yards and touchdowns by all 3 Bucs wide receivers, and you had to guess which one was which.
Let me guess. Brown is 1, Godwin 2.
Antonio Brown missed the game and had 3 points in another game. So in the other games combined, he outperformed them through weeks 1 through 5. Like in total, missing practically 2 games. That's phenomenal production for a wide receiver. He's still a top 10 receiver in fantasy. If he's on most teams, honestly.
Yeah.
I think if you put him pretty much anywhere, he's fine.
Just look at this. Did he get injured week 2 against Atlanta?
He got dinged up.
Yeah. So I'm going to take the Atlanta game out of there. In 4 games, his target numbers are 7, 11, 8, and 13. In those 4 games, 23, 13, 31, 34 points. He has 1, 2, 4 touchdowns. Antonio Brown isn't getting enough credit right now, and it's because of the name. It's because of the weird season that he had and the allegations and this and that. He's not getting enough credit. He played with the Bucs, 6-8 games last year? And I remember speaking about this on one of our shows before the season started. I think he got 40 targets last year in X amount of games that he played. He was on pace to lead the Bucs in targets if he played all 16 games. He was going to have 80, 90 targets or something like that.
So
he's not getting enough credit. He is not getting enough credit right now. And Antonio Brown is a bona fide wide receiver 1 or 2 in fantasy. He's not a 3 where you drafted him. This is a guy that when you see him against you in the matchup, he's the one I'm worrying about now. He's one of the guys that I'm worrying about. He's up there. You got to give him credit where it's due.
Just a quick other note, with not including this past week's game and with including the Atlanta game where he only had 3.3 points, Antonio Brown is averaging the 10th most points for wide receivers in the league.
Yeah, and that's a deep position too. Phenomenal. So if that position is so deep that if you converted that to running back, hypothetically, this is probably a really dumb analogy, but if you took the depth of the receiver and shrunk it down, he's probably playing a running back 2, for example. I'm just spitballing. I'm just trying to show how valuable he kind of is right now at that position because of how deep it is. He's a guy he's a wide receiver 1 or 2. That's where he is.
Just the guys that just real quick. I'm sorry, I know we're going a little long on AB, but just real quick, the guys that he's outperforming on a weekly basis right now are DK, who was drafted in the 2nd or 3rd round, Keenan Allen, DeAndre Hopkins
too. Yeah.
Devontae
Adams.
Devontae Adams. He's outperforming Mike Evans and Chris Godwin.
Who's ahead of him right now? Who's ahead of him right now? Cooper Kupp,
Mike Williams, Tyreek Hill, Devontae Adams, Debo, Marquise Brown, DJ Moore, Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson.
I wouldn't put GJ. Are you basing that off the list or that's just off the top of your head?
This is average points per game through the first 5 weeks, not even including this week.
And are you including the Atlanta game in that one?
That is including Atlanta in the average.
So you're
if you take out the Atlanta game,
Antonio Brown's a top 5 fantasy wide receiver right now. I don't know where he's going to finish, but right now Antonio Brown's a top 5 fantasy wide receiver. Speaking of Mike Williams, 4.7 points. He didn't practice all week. We said you probably got to play him on the show again. That's just really tough to bench that guy. He's on bye. He'll get good. He'll be fine by next week, but that's a rough one. Going to the running backs, Thursday night Lenny, 30.7 fantasy points. He's locked in as the Bucs running back 1. Jonathan Taylor, 28 fantasy points. Joe Mixon, that ankle's not bothering him, 26 fantasy points. Darnell Henderson, phenomenal matchup like we said last week on Lock or Flop. Absolute lock, 24.7 fantasy points. Darrell Williams for the Chiefs gets more goal line looks than Clyde Edwards-Helaire's gotten per game this season, 23.9. Nick, who's your biggest running back stud of the week?
My God, Jonathan Taylor, the year 2 breakout, just like CeeDee Lamb. This is the guy. I predicted him to finish as the running back 1 on the year. I don't know if he still will with how productive Derrick Henry's been, but he's not far off. He had the one big breakaway run, and even if you take away that big run, which didn't result in a touchtown,
he had 145 yards. So you take
away the 80 as the top 7 running back on the week.
He had 60 yards and 2 touchdowns. That's still 18 fantasy points without that.
Exactly. So you can't just account for the one game that the one big run and that's how he broke out. The guy has been nothing short of phenomenal and he has paid off his first round pick without a question.
Did you watch the run? How did he get tackled?
I did watch the run.
How did he get tackled? So just to be clear, I knocked out today. I knocked out at 150 maybe. I wake up the fantasy notifications. I see a big play alert, Jonathan Taylor, 82-yard run, but I don't see touchdown. So I say to myself, what? So
I forget it was so early on in the game. I think he either got run out of bounds or someone was running with it, something like that.
Because you know how our leagues work. Like that's big points if he scored. He
That
would have had
would have been an
he would have had like a
40
40-point game at least. He would have had a 40-point game instead of 29.
Yeah.
I want to talk about all of them. Like Mixon, he's solid. Like I'm not gonna talk about Mixon because you drafted him early. Ankle's fine. He's good. Darrell Williams, you're playing him every week until Clyde Edwards-Helaire comes back, and that might turn into a committee because he looked pretty good today. Henderson, we spoke about a locker flop, so I'm not going to talk about him. He had a phenomenal matchup. He's a running back 2 now. You play him every single week as a running back 2. Leonard Fournette, like we talked about it, like Rojo's dropped. Like Rojo shouldn't be on any fantasy roster. Fournette has assumed that role. Thursday night Lenny, Sunday Lenny, Monday Lenny, playoff Lenny, I don't care. Like Lenny, locked into your lineup, Lenny. Lock him in every single week as a running back 2. Tom Brady likes him clearly. Tom Brady trusts him. Bruce Arians trusts him. They like running on the goal line. Brady hasn't been sneaking as much, so lock in Leonard Fournette. Then for the busts, Austin Eckler, kind of the same situation. All the Chargers are on the duds of the week. So running back 25 with 9.5 points. The Cardinals played very well today, but the running backs didn't. Connor and Chase Edmonds both had 8 points. The running backs 29 and 30. Then Myles Gaskin went back to relevancy at 3.4. Who's your biggest dud of the week, Nick?
I'm going to talk about Gaskin a little bit. I mean, the dude finished with 3.4. I talked about it last week. You know, Jacoby Brissett, 50% of his targets went to the tight end or to the running back position. That's why Gaskin had the boom week. I warned people to sit him. My opponent chose to play him this week, and unfortunately it resulted in a loss for him. But, you know, Gaskin is not startable anymore. I think that there's a very reasonable case, even with how deep the position is, to cut him because he's not going to find production unless the team is winning, and they just lost to the Jacksonville Jaguars.
I was ready to put him on lock or flop, and then he had that game, and I'm like, all right. I mean, stash or trash, and I'm like, all right, he had the game, like, whatever. Here's an interesting note, Nick. 2 Miami tight ends. We're about to talk about the tight ends. I'll transition here. Both Mike Gesicki and Durham Smythe, is that how I say his name? Both had 10-plus fantasy points. So I know Brissett targeted his tight ends, but so did Tua. So
I think that had a little bit more to do with the lack of receiving talent there with Fuller and Devontae out.
It's possible. But again, rookie quarter, he's not a rookie anymore, but he's only played so many games.
I don't think he's played a full season worth. I don't think he's played 16.
No, he hasn't.
Right at it. So
no. So yeah. If you see me looking aside, the Seahawks game's on the TV now, and the fantasy carnival is not in town right now because they forced a 3-and-out when I'm starting Harris and Big Ben. So great, guys. Great.
Harris, so.
My nightmare in this game is if it's like a 10-6 game and Seattle loses. That would be an absolute nightmare.
You will not see Nick on Friday.
Yeah. Back to tight ends. So Noah Fant actually jumped up tight end 1 on the week with 24 points. Mike Gesicki tight end 2 with 22. Kelsey back to the grace of tight end 3 with 17. Mark Andrews has been solid the whole year. Tight end 4, 17.8. OJ Howard, like, came out of nowhere, really. This is what we've been saying for like 3 years. OJ Howard, tight end 5, 16.9. Ricky Seals-Jones, we'll talk about later, tight end 6 with 15.9. And TJ Hawkinson finally scored more than 8 points with 15.4. And no duds on the week. I think Waller had like 12 points, so I'm not dudding him. There wasn't a dud for the tight ends this week. So, Nick, who is your biggest tight end stud of the week?
Let's go. You go. If you have one in mind, you do them first, because
I'm going to go with Gesicki because I think we didn't know what we would see with this offense when Tua came back. And Gesicki was a guy that he had 0 the first week with Tua, and I think people got worried and started dropping him. And then he just kind of blew up again. So I think Gesicki's just turned into a guy that hold on, we got an injury. Dak Prescott got the fantasy alert. Dak Prescott suffered a right calf strain on the game-winning touchdown pass to CeeDee Lamb. He'll be evaluated further tomorrow when the team gets back to Dallas. So monitor that one. All right. Gesicki, I mean, he scored 8 last week with 2 against Tampa, but it's Tampa. He still had 7 targets. His targets are incredible for a tight end. I'm taking week 1 out of it. 6, 12, 6, 7, 9. His points, 7, 18, 16, 8, 19. He's currently the tight end 10. He's a guy you're
That
playing.
also
every
doesn't
week.
include this week. So
Yeah, unless that does include this week. Well, the position rank doesn't, but
yeah.
he's a guy that you're now playing every single week. Unless you have another tight end. Like I have Dawson Knox, and I chose to play Dawson Knox this week, and I'm kind of annoyed about that because this is 22 points I left on the board. But unless you had another viable tight end, you're playing Gesicki every week.
I'll talk a little bit about Mark Andrews. Mark Andrews was another guy we weren't too certain of. Kind of in that teeter position when you were drafting, where there was the top 3 tight ends, then there was Hawkinson, Pitts, and him, and then it was like the fallout. And with Andrews' poor production last year, where he didn't see the same touchdown share that we were expecting after MVP Lamar's season, Lamar looks just as good as he did in that MVP season. His stats are actually a little bit better than they were then, and Andrews is seeing a massive production from it. If you took Andrews where you did, he was a steal in the draft last week. Tight end 1 on the week. This week, tight end 4. I know we still got a couple games to go, but he was the best tight end remaining out of the bunch. So I mean, you got to be happy with Andrews. You got to be happy with his production. He was drafted in your top 6. Probably going to finish in the top 6.
Yeah, probably. OJ Howard, Nick, you're not picking him up, right? This is the random
This
tight end
is
Cardinals.
this guy and the Dolphins backup tight end. Those are your fluke ones.
Throw him on the wheel of tight ends that you spin. It's like playing at a game where you spin the wheel, and you win like whatever you win at a little kiddie event, whatever. Yeah, you're not picking up OJ Howard.
Get a little sticker.
All right, let's go to the waiver wire to talk about people that we should pick up. The waiver wire is tough this week, guys. Honestly, we were running through a lot of players, and we're kind of at the point of the season where teams know what they have, and the only waiver targets that you're really going to find are when running backs or quarterbacks or receivers do get hurt. But again, we're going to mention some guys that are possible. So some quarterback streamers for next week. Jameis Winston's going to Seattle on Monday night. Matt Ryan's going to Miami. For running backs, Khalil Herbert, Damian Williams, Darrell Williams, Alex Collins, if any of them are still on your waiver wire. I don't think any of them will be. We don't know if Herbert or Williams or Damian Williams will be playing next week, but I think they're both rosterable. I think Darrell Williams and Collins need to be rostered too. So if they are on your waiver wire, that has to be your number 1 target, but I'm assuming that those 4 will not be on your waiver wire. Mm-hmm. Nick, Demetric, how do I say it? Demetric Felton.
Felton.
He's another one that could be a big one, depending on the Browns' injury report. You need to wait until Tuesday night, basically. Again, we're recording Sunday night, but when we know the injuries to those running backs, he could be the number 1 waiver target, knowing that those other running backs are gone. All right, Geno Smith, first pass. I'm watching it right now. Let's see. DK got chopped up. All right. Good job, Geno. And then the wide receivers. AJ Green has been stellar. He's emerged as the number 2 receiver for the Cardinals. I think he should be rostered everywhere. Some other names: Christian Kirk, Donovan Peoples-Jones, KJ Osborne, Quez Watkins. I'm not really high on much of them, but if your roster's deep, pick up somebody if you have an open spot. Tight ends, Ricky Seals-Jones has been he's emerged as a viable tight end for when Logan Thomas is out. So I think he's the number 1 tight end target on the week if you do need a tight end. And then defensive streamers. We don't talk about this a lot, but again, we don't really have a waiver wire list like we normally do. So the Saints against the Seahawks. Again, we're watching Geno right now. We don't know how he's going to play, but I'm going to assume that'll be a favorable matchup for the Saints. Patriots are going up against Zach Wilson and the Jets. The Rams, the Cardinals, and the Bucks have really great matchups. I don't think they'll be on your waiver wire, but the Rams have Detroit, Cardinals have the Texans, and the Bucks have the Bears.
Keep an eye out for the Saints because they just came off the bye, so it's very likely you'll find them on the waiver.
Yep. Nick, who are your top 2 or 3 waiver targets and targets that should be available? I'm assuming Khalil Herbert, Damian Williams, and Darrell Williams and Alex Collins are not available. Again, if those 4 are available, that's your number 1. But we're assuming that in most leagues they're not available.
Yeah, so I'm gonna go. So like we said, if you're streaming your quarterback and your defense, those are your top 2. If not, if you're thin at the tight end position, I really do like Ricky Seals-Jones. The way that they're using him is a lot more dynamic than you'd see from a backup tight end. Usually you'll see a backup tight end be the check down guy or just blocking on most routes. Nope, that's not what they're doing. They're putting him 20 yards downfield. Most tight ends are not seeing that. I really like him in the way they're using him until Logan Thomas gets back. But my number 1 has to be Demetric Felton. With Nick Chubb's uncertainty, and I assume Kareem Hunt is definitely going to be out this week and for multiple weeks, Demetric Felton, if he's there on your waiver wire, the Browns are the number one running team in the league. They lead in every single statistic. Number one in first downs on the run, rushing yards. I think it was rushing touchdowns and rushing percentage. He's going to be a benefit. Demetric Felton should be the number one. He should be available in most leagues. I picked him up knowing that Chubb was out and maybe he would find the production. And if he was out for multiple weeks, so I'm lucky enough to have him in a couple leagues. But he's my number one for sure, no questions.
Ricky Seals-Jones targets, by the way, are 4, 9, and 6 over the last 3 weeks. So yeah, if you need a tight end, he's the guy to go with. I agree with Nick on Demetric Felton, and again, depending on the Browns running back situation. If you need a receiver or a flex guy, AJ Green, his target 6, 6, 6, 6, 2, and 6. He's had over 60 yards 3 times. He has 3 touchdowns. He's had over 10 fantasy points, 1, 2, 3, 4 out of 6 weeks. So he's rosterable. He's a guy that should be on most rosters right now. He's only owned in 33% of leagues. That's not enough. He's the number 2 option on the best offense in the league. I said the Cardinals were the best offense in the league 2 or 3 weeks ago. I'm sticking with that. The Bucs might have the most talent, but right now the Cardinals are the best offense in the league. So that's our waiver wire for you guys. Hopefully you can get somebody that helps you out. What do you got?
Sorry, just real quick. One last one, and it's a very controversial one. If Brandon Ayuk is on your waiver wire, go pick him up.
Yeah,
He's coming off the bye. The team might rework how they work that offense, knowing that they've been struggling, and with Trey Lance adjusting. If that is what they plan to do, Ayuk is going to have a prominent role in the offense.
He's earned 1 or 2 more weeks after the bye.
Exactly. So if he's there and you can pick him up, stash him, don't play him, give him 2 weeks. If after 2 weeks he doesn't have the production, he's going to sit on your waiver wire the rest of the year anyway. So it doesn't hurt too much to pick him up.
All right, that's your waiver wire. And if you are going to pick up people, you have to drop people. So let's go to stash or trash. We're going to tell you if we want to stash or trash these players. Let's start with Jamal Williams, Nick. Is he a stash or trash for you?
I'm still stashing him just because DeAndre Swift has a tough injury history. And Jamal Williams is clearly the RB2 here. There's no real debate for it. So he's a good handcuff to have. And he still sees production some weeks. I know he's struggled the past couple, but I'm not too concerned. This was another bad game. I think they only ran the ball 14 total times, maybe 15. And it's because they went down 27-0. They could only pass the ball. That was the only option that they really had.
Yeah, I mean, they like him, but yeah, it's just a tough game. I mean, Swift, he had 17 points, but he also had a touchdown, so closer to 11, really, if he didn't have a touchdown. And Jamal Williams isn't playable, but in most rosters that have 10 bench spots, he should be on a bench spot because the running back position is still thin. I'm not super high on him as I was compared to the rest of the season, but we'll see how that goes. All right, Marlon Mack. To me, he's a trash. I don't think he should be on any fantasy rosters at the moment.
I'd be willing to hold on to him because the team did say that they were interested in trading him. And if that happens, I'm assuming the team that's going to trade for him is either dealing with a major running back injury or needs a major running back. And Marlon Mack has that potential. 2 years ago, before they drafted Jonathan Taylor, he was a 1,000-yard rusher. 2 years removed, he's someone you have on most of your rosters. If he gets traded, he'll find good production, and he'll probably be the number 1 waiver wire pick the week that he is traded. So you might as well stash him for now. And if after the trade deadline he's never going to find the production in that offense. So.
Yeah. What about Mecole Hardman?
I like Mecole Hardman, especially. A lot of people have been down on him. He had a nice week this week, even though it was mostly made up of a 50-yard catch that didn't result in his touchdown. But Hardman is going to find production with Tyreek Hill being a little dinged up. If Tyreek misses any time, which I highly doubt he does because he returned to the game, Hardman is the clear-cut wide receiver 1. And Mahomes, he gets pressure. He just goes 60 yards. Someone's going to go grab it, one of my speed demons, and that's going to be him. So hold on to him for now.
I'm just not comfortable playing him, so I think I'd rather have AJ Green if he's available on my waiver wire.
I agree with that.
What about Latavius Murray?
They really liked rotating those running backs and giving us confusion this week. But I just don't know if I'd feel confident starting him. So if I could get Demetric Felton, I'd take Demetric Felton over him, knowing I could lock him in next week.
Yeah, I won't stash Murray if there's another option, but if there's a week when buys come up and injuries and you have to play him, you're hoping for a touchdown. What about Hunter Renfrow? I think he only had 6-7 points today.
Yeah, I'm not too concerned. Henry Ruggs did phenomenal this week.
Edwards too had like a 50-yard catch, I should say.
Yeah, the team looked good against the tough defense, and obviously there's a new head coach there because of the whole Gruden situation. So hold that with Renfro. Renfro has the best connection with Carr for the longest amount of time outside of maybe Josh Jacobs. I think Jacobs has been there just as long. Renfro maybe even a year longer. So he's got the best connection with him. Waller does as well, obviously, but Renfro's a good option to hold on to.
Renfro's also had over 10 fantasy points 5 out of 6 weeks. He's the wide receiver 27 or whatever. Right now he's 27, so he's still like a top 30, 40 wide receiver on the year. I'm holding on to Renfro. I have Sony Michel in here. I don't know why, because somebody in our league has him, but he shouldn't be rostered at this point. Not after Darrell Henderson's performance. There's just no reason to, unless you really have an open bench spot and you don't want anybody else.
I would hold on to Sony Michel if you're the Darrell Henderson owner, because I think he will be the handcuff, and Henderson has seen way too many missed practices this year for me to feel comfortable thinking that he's going to start 17 games.
What about Zach Ertz, now traded to the Arizona Cardinals?
Absolutely lock him in. I love Ertz. I think we might talk about him on Stash or Trash or the news segment going into week 1 for Friday's show. But I love Zach Ertz. If he's on your waiver wire, I'd go pick him up.
You talk about lock or flop?
Lock or flop or in news for the trade that happened.
Yeah.
Because it'll be his debut game.
Yeah. I think you keep Zach Ertz. He had 12 fantasy points this week. I think he's a tight end that needed a change. And on top of that, he's still a guy that could play. So that offense is crowded. I need to see what he does. I don't know if I want to start him this week, but
yeah,
I think he's the guy you do keep on your roster. What about Kenneth Gainwell? To me, I just don't want the Eagles running backs. Like, you may have to keep Miles Sanders, but he's not playable, and Gainwell's droppable. Like, I don't want the Eagles running backs. They're just never going to produce for you.
I don't want a single Eagle outside of Jalen Hurts and Devontae Smith if you're in Dynasty. I don't even want Devontae Smith this year because I don't like their matchups and I don't like the way they spread the ball. They spread the ball like New England, but they're not coached as well as New England.
They're no good. The Eagles, no good. And last and not least, Sam Darnold. Stash or trash Sam as a backup quarterback.
No,
I would have said trash. Like, if you didn't have that last drive or two, I would have said trash.
So just so you know, they pulled up my favorite stat. Sam Darnold with Christian McCaffrey this year has not thrown an interception, and with Christian McCaffrey this year, without Christian McCaffrey this year, has thrown 1 touchdown and 9 interceptions. Sam Darnold is droppable.
That can't be true. He had 2 against Dallas, 2 touchdowns. He had 31 fantasy points. He didn't have McCaffrey that game.
That was a stat that they pulled up about it, but I mean,
that stat's wrong. I don't know who pulled it.
It might have been wrong.
Yeah,
I saw some stat where he had an absurd amount of touchdown to, or a terrible touchdown to interception, without McCaffrey. So if CMC's not in there, which he's not for another 2 weeks now because they put him on the IR, Sam Darnold is not playable. I don't care how good the matchup is.
I'm not comfortable playing him, but I'll put him as a backup because guess what? I lost Russell Wilson, and now I'm playing quarterback carousel every single week. So
I'd rather play quarterback carousel than lock in Sam Darnold in my lineup.
Well, what quarterbacks on the carousel would you rather play, Sam?
Jameis Winston.
Okay, so is Jameis Winston on our waiver? I'm just gonna go to our waiver because this is my league that we're talking about. So I'm gonna go to our waiver. I'm gonna tell you my options for next week because right now I have Big Ben, and right now Big Ben's not playing too well against the fantasy carnival of the Seahawks.
They'll be fine in the second half. I'm not worried.
So Big Ben next week, he's on bye. So I can't even play Big Ben next week. So my options for next week are going to be Daniel Jones against the Panthers, Tua Tagovailoa against the Falcons, Carson Wentz against – are they on bye? They might be on bye too. 49ers, Geno Smith. I'm not even playing them. Derek Carr against – the Eagles. I think I would play Carr if I could get him off the waiver wire. Justin Fields, Mac Jones.
You'll be able to get him. You have the worst record in the league.
I want to. Oh, we'll see how this. we'll see how this week shakes out. My team definitely has.
Just don't forget to make the right waiver order this week.
Thanks to my 800 points against through 6 weeks, averaging 170 points.
I feel
against.
You. Just to clarify, we're tied with the worst record in the league. So we're both over 850 points allowed through.
Our teams, from an offensive perspective, our teams are probably middle of the pack, but we've just been gashed with points. So our record, we probably should be like a 3-3, maybe a 4-2 team, but No good. So out of all those quarterbacks, Nick, where do you put Sam Darnold? I'll just name him off to you.
I pulled it up. I pulled it up, so don't worry. I can take a look.
Okay.
So Derek Carr. Let me check what his matchup is next week.
The Eagles. He has the Eagles.
I'll play Derek Carr over against Philly.
What about Daniel Jones against the Panthers?
Trevor's on bye. Daniel Jones against the Panthers. That I'd take the shot on it depending on what receivers are playing in that game.
What about Matt
Kirk
Ryan
Cousins just lit him up, and Daniel Jones is a top 10 quarterback in fantasy so far. That's surprising.
What about Matt Ryan against the Dolphins?
Coming off the bye, absolutely. I'll play Matt Ryan over Sam Darnold.
Okay. What about Tua? Tua has
Atlanta.
Has Atlanta, yeah.
I'll take Tua.
You're down on Darnold. All right, fair enough. Alrighty, that was Stash or Trash. Hopefully that did help you kind of decide which players you should not keep on your rosters anymore. And that is our show for today. If it was your first time watching, thank you watching or listening. Thank you so much. Our next show will be Friday. The audio version will be on Stitcher, Google Podcast, iTunes, anywhere where you can find your audio podcast. If you're on iTunes, please give us a 5-star rating and a review. If you want to watch that Friday show, it is on our YouTube channel. The live show will be this Sunday and every Sunday, 11 a.m. Eastern time on YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. You can follow us on Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok at PrimeTimeFFPod. YouTube and Facebook are Primetime Fantasy Podcast. Nick, anything else you want to say before we go watch Geno Smith?
Before we go watch Geno, just thank you guys for everybody that does tune in. We truly do appreciate it. We're sorry that we had to record on such short notice in between the Sunday games. So you're definitely going to want to be there for Friday because we're going to catch up on all this news. There's going to be a lot of news that we're going to have to cover over the next 5 days. You're not going to want to miss it. We've been incredibly accurate and bold with some of our predictions that have hit. In my opinion, we give some pretty good advice, and we're entertaining to say the least. So definitely stop by if you got the time. We're going to give you the coverage on everything that you're going to need going into the Sunday. And if you got more questions about it, hop into our Sunday live shows.
You can follow me on Twitter at the Nick Giacoppi. I probably have a slew of Seahawks tweets already about this phenomenal game because, they're on the 40 right now, so we'll see what happens. All right, guys, that's all we got. We'll speak to you on Friday's show. Thanks again. Best of luck in Week 7 coming up. We'll help you the best we can, as we do every time. Talk to you on Friday.